Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. I'm your host, Ade Darami, and for the last few weeks I've had the same co-host, and that is my colleague, Mr. Mboj. Mboj, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ade. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And for our viewers, both old and new viewers, let's just tell you how this works. It's quite simple. We take 10 stories from the week, we go through them and we discuss them in some details. Some stories require a bit more discussion than others, but nonetheless we try and do justice to all of them. So, as I always say, let's get cracking. First story is up, transport fares saga. Every time we hear about problems regarding transport, it's either people complain about having to do extra journeys or they're being paid too much. What am I talking about? Have a look at this.
Through their press release, they have been calling the 2017 tariff. But as far as we are concerned, it's 2013 tariff. 9 years ago. The Gambia have increment of fare 2013. 2017, what's happened is, the time this new government came in, they reduced the pump prices to $40. According to them, they feel like the consumers or the commuters need to benefit from this. They reduced transport fare to 25%. So within the period, the fuel increased again to $48. So they return it to normal prices, to 2013 tariff. So the tariff is not 2017, it's 2013.
Interesting one there. We had Mr. Cisse there of the Transport Union. Mr. Mboj, this one, an interesting one, case of not singing from the same hymn sheet. The ministry in their press release quoted a specific act, and you heard their Transport Union boss saying actually they're quoting the wrong act. What we do know, however, is that people are complaining about the prices they have to pay.
It's all becoming convoluted here, isn't it?
Sure.
Where have we heard that recently? A bit of deja vu here, KMC.
Yeah,
one
right.
person relying on one bit of the law,
That's
another
right.
person relying on another bit of the law. I spoke to a lawyer recently who was telling me that this is really one of the consequences of the comical nature of the 1997 Constitution, the laws, the incongruity, the contradictions. There are all sorts of things now. We are living these things. Quite interesting. So here we have it. The ministry is saying that we've got an illegal increment.
Yes.
But again, the head of the union at some point said that the drivers must obey the law, didn't he?
Indeed.
And then afterwards he said something like the situation was created by the government.
Yes, he was
So,
quite definite about that.
Yes,
Okay.
so I'm wondering, what are you talking about here? When you say that the drivers obey the law, I take it that you are aware that they are potentially or possibly breaking it. So what the minister is saying is possibly correct, they should do that. So when you say they created this situation, what situation? Whereby the drivers would want to disobey the law, but one would wonder, why is that? So there's a confusion, and perhaps what the lawyer said, the books,
Sure.
see, this is the key. This is where one more area where we will suffer. Really, the sort of nonsense.
The kind of spaghetti soup of confusion that there is around, which law applies.
Yes.
Because what I found intriguing, I spoke to colleagues in the office about the journeys they take and those who have to take public transport. And if you think about it and you multiply that across the country, across the region, we're talking about tens, if not hundreds of thousands of journeys. Who's going to enforce it? If I'm a taxi driver and I overcharge you, are they really saying they're going to actually prosecute every one of those cases? It's ridiculous.
That is precisely it, because I commute as well using public transport every day. So absolutely, imagine, for instance, from Palmarima Junction to Senegambia, to traffic lights. We call it traffic lights here. Well, it used to be $8.
Right.
So it suddenly just turned to $10, and the drivers will tell you, look, I don't have any change. Just listen to the blase. So what do I do? Do I insist on that? But here there's got to be sort of balance of, I have to prioritize. I have 110 things to do, what I mean? So I'm not going to stand there
over $2.
Over $2.
No.
So that is it. That's the rational thing for me would be to go. But really, I know that on a certain level, I must insist on it for these things to happen. Yes. So this is it. But what does that tell you? you. There's a sort of failure, a structural failure of some sort. That really anybody can get up and do whatever you want to do.
That's why I thought it was intriguing that they summoned the press, having issued this warning about the illegal increase really, and said, kind of issued dire warnings about it. And you thought, you find yourself thinking, what exactly are they going to do? If people keep saying, I haven't got change, so sorry, I've got your 10 in my hand, are you going to fight me for it? Of course not. You want to go to work, it's raining or whatever. You haven't got time for it to be sort of squabbling over $2. And so you just let it go.
This is not the sort of thing where you offer stern warnings.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Get a good public policy.
Sure.
Policy. That is what's going to solve it. There is a failure. We've seen it here time and time again. This back and forth between the ministry and the taxi drivers. What should the fare be? There's been this back and forth. But as we said, there seems not to be any kind of structure in place. So all they do is just offer these stern warnings, and then they will come out, I don't know, next week after, and say, oh, we've reached a compromise, until the next time.
And you know what I found interesting and intriguing, and maybe he wasn't being he wasn't dissembling, or he wasn't trying to be cute, when the transport union boss there was talking about obey the law, the fact that he's quoting a different law, essentially he's telling his members, obey that one, not the other one, because I'm saying this is the right one, under which this this argument, this discussion should be. And so, it's like two different things. It's like playing football on two different pitches.
I'm beginning to think that perhaps with some of these things we should be taking them to the courts, then who would begin to clarify things for us. Because if we want to rely on the Constitution, it's in a mess.
Yeah, and the transport union boss was quite scathing, Mr. Sise there, because what he was saying was that he even showed our reporter. He said, these are all the letters that we've written, and we've not even had the courtesy of a reply. He said if they were serious about dealing with us, at least they would reply, or they would summon us to a meeting. He said that has not happened, and he showed them the correspondence that hadn't been responded to.
Yes, absolutely. I saw that part, but I wonder if we were to ask the minister what they would say. They would tell you, well, we've responded, we've done this, we've done that. So it's really quite difficult for some of us, especially in the media, to establish independently what the facts
what we would like to see as commuters is that these people need to sit around the table and come to some sort of agreement, and then that can be rolled out, saying, okay, we've met, we've discussed, and this is what's been decided.
Absolutely. Ideally, that is what we want to happen. But again, this is it. If we have within the laws that they rely on, there is this basic bone of contention. Is a difficult one.
Correct.
So today they can paper it over. Absolutely, and then bring cook up any kind of deal, as it were, to just sort it out this time. But structurally, the problem is still there until the next time.
That is it. Until the next time. And so until the next time when we were discussing this, because I'm sure we will be. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. And so transport fare saga, this one will rumble on. Now, another one, something a bit more joyous. The team from the Tokyo Olympics recently returned, and they met lots of people, and one of the people they met was His Excellency the President. Have a look.
So Gina, others, we have interest in sport and have interest in this country. So I will thank the entire team, Mr. Mendy and others. I will thank everybody for the support you have given to these young people. Let's continue to support them. We have hope that maybe before France, we will see a different Gina.
At the end of the ceremony, the president awarded the athletes $500,000 and a brand new car to the only female Olympian who in the past was called a poor Olympian who joins public transport to go for training.
Yes, very much the thing these days. Mr. Mboj, we know that the team didn't pick up any medals, but what they did pick up was plaudits from here in the Gambia for quite gutsy performances, and the fact that Gina made 2 semi-finals. But interestingly for me, both the Minister and His Excellency the President mentioned that it wasn't just about them, even though they were recognizing them. They would like to put more emphasis on all sports, because that's the way forward. What were your thoughts on what you saw and heard?
Well, first with Gina, I feel you, my dear. I feel you. I take public transport to work as well. we know how that is like.
Sure.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, the rhetoric will always be the same.
Yeah, sure.
We'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do that, we'll do that. But for us, we have to really focus more on the action.
Sure.
Fine, we've taken note of the statement of intention, granted. So we have to see then what's going to happen next. So for the money given, $500,000
for the team.
For the team.
And she gets a car.
And she gets a car.
I hope she's got a driving license.
You know, stuff like that.
Sure.
And I don't know, if I had to put on my tabloidal cap, the first thing I'll ask, where did you get the money?
Sure.
Is it personally yours or is it the States? You know, stuff like that. But that is not the issue. Of course, fantastic to Gina Bass. Obviously, she broke the national record.
Indeed.
Twice.
Yes, indeed.
Got to the semi-finals.
Yeah.
We've been going to the Olympics, I think, since 1984 in Los Angeles.
That's right.
I don't think we've ever reached, you know, this.
We never have.
We've never have.
Sure.
So that in itself is a milestone.
Sure. But I mean, in the broader context, this could be quite a good year or two coming up for Gambian sports. We've got AFCON, first ever qualification. We've got the Commonwealth Games. We've got the World Championships. Now, if we're serious, surely this is where we need to see what all the talk is about. Where is the action? What are they going to do to help our team prepare for the AFCON? What are they going to do to help our athletes prepare for the Commonwealth Games and the World Championships? That's what we need to see, surely.
Absolutely, and more generally, culturally, even the younger people getting more interested in sports.
Sure.
Perhaps that might divert them, as it were, from that back way stuff.
Yeah,
that was a way of really expanding your youthful sort of energy. So, absolutely, you have that social element that it might do, and yes, but structurally something must be there, as it were, to help them. So we keep on talking about government will put in more money, government will put in more money, and yet government on the other side will come and tell us that, you know, we don't have much, and given it in the context of COVID-19, the recovery, the economy has contracted everywhere, and we depend on grants, some of the things we depend for income. So when we look at it realistically, let us just prepare ourselves so that we can be fortified against, if you like, disappointment. You know what I mean? But in the face of that, perhaps the Gambia National Olympic Committee, all sports really, should think of how do we team up. Perhaps this is where government can facilitate, as it were, with donor countries. It's not always giving us physical cash.
Yes,
at all.
Well, you know what? It's remarkable you mentioned this, and I really mean it, because I'm just on a podcast which come out in the next week or two for the Center for International Studies, and they asked me, they said, tell us something out of the box about what US policy towards the Gambia should be going forward. And I said, well, if I was a member of the government, I would ask you for one thing. I said, but as a member of the public who's gone around the Gambia and I've seen the sporting and athletic talent that's not getting opportunities, I would say, give us sports scholarships, come and build sporting infrastructure, football pitches, basketball courts, those sorts of things, so that people can see this as a way forward. And I said, you know, you look at what's happened in Jamaica over the last 20, 30 years. You have somebody like Linford Christie, who's now a Usain Bolt rather, who's now a multi-millionaire, opening restaurants and so on. But if you look at the infrastructure that there is in Jamaican sports, across even, including football, even though they've only qualified for the World Cup once, but the infrastructure there is immense. And I said, you know, that's what I would ask for. Put it, don't give any money to the government, in fact. Build these structures and offer these scholarships.
Yeah, absolutely, that's what they should be doing. That's how also government should be thinking as well. And then when we widen it, we had a tradition here. There was something here, I think it was brought by Father Joseph Goff of St. Augustine's High School. Indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. So sports conceptualized in this way as a kind of supplementary to a general education. Remember,
that's what I grew up with?
Yes.
Intersect.
Yes, in Britain, remember, we used to say stuff like, the Battle of Britain, was one of the
playing fields of
Eton. Stuff like Waterloo, wasn't it? The Battle of Waterloo, one of the playgrounds of Eton. So that's it, that conception of sports, it was here. Yeah. So a lot of people developed through that system. One remembers people like Baimala Wada and others that there are so many others.
Yeah.
So I think that is that concept, that approach really to sports being integrated. That is what has been lost in many ways, which we must try to bring back. Just make sure that we have a good program running through different levels, all the levels of
That's
of
right,
our
and
system.
one feeds into the
One
next.
feeds into the next.
Yeah.
Get the PE teachers, let them well trained.
Properly
So
trained.
this is the key.
Yeah.
And then you identify who's good in what early, then you prepare them so that they can compete
Sure.
in the international arena.
That's right,
It takes
yes.
a lot.
It takes a heck of a lot.
Just look at the world
And
champions.
interestingly, CAF, the African Football Federation, are just launching a schools competition. And that should be quite interesting to see which schools from the Gambia, for example, enter, if any, and how they get on with that. But thanks for that. But yeah, still a lot to be done. But we wish them well in the competitions to come. Thanks for that. Now, the Human Rights, National Human Rights Commission called the press to give feedback on how they've been doing recently, Mr. Mboj. And they also had a few things to say about some of the things they've been seeing and hearing in the society. Have a look.
The Commission expressed concern at the derogatory remarks directed at the TRRC and its commissioners, but also the attacks on the anticipated implementation of the recommendations. It renews its commitment to unbiased process in its work and vows to raise red flag when and where necessary.
Our colleague Ali Cisse, they're talking Human Rights Commission expressed concerns about derogatory comments aimed at the TRRC. Mr. Mboj, we talk about freedom of speech. Can people not make derogatory comments about the TRRC? Are they untouchable?
No, it depends on, I suppose in this context, it will depend on what is specifically said.
Sure, there were threats and
That's
so on.
it.
Yes.
So to say inflammatory or derogatory,
Yeah.
all of that, to me, it's still quite vague. I think I'll have to take each situation as it comes.
Sure.
Because, yes, we have to balance between freedom of speech
Sure.
and something that would incite hatred or violence.
Indeed,
isn't
indeed.
it? That sort of thing.
I think that's what they were getting at. In fact, I mean,
That's the
I've
balance.
been deliberately sort of
Yes.
condensing and paraphrasing what the chairman said, but essentially that's what he said, things that would potentially incite violence towards commissioners. But also, he spent quite a lot of time being personal about one individual, and that was Gorgimbu.
Yes.
And he went on to detail for the press the discussions they'd had and the reception they'd got from government, and he said, I'll be astonished to get the response from them as to why they felt they should reinstate this gentleman.
I think the whole country is waiting for that answer.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was the government that established a panel.
Well, indeed.
Move.
That's
And
right.
it was a sort of multi-stakeholder panel, wasn't it? You have all sorts of people in it. And they came up with their recommendations.
Very strong recommendations.
And then this is what government has done.
Sure.
But maybe, because here when we talk to our colleagues, we hear their sentiments.
Yeah.
It can be, and this could be sort of tied to why Golden Book was brought back. And you do hear them say, oh, the crime is going up. There's so much unruliness, there's so much rudeness. It's people like Golden Book
Who strike fear into
who
the
strike fear
criminals.
into them, who this is good for them.
Yes.
So it's a very strange way of looking at our situation now, and the general, your typical average Gambian, the thinking they've got on these things. So they don't mind a bit of bending human rights rules, as long as these people understand that they shouldn't be doing this. Remember, with us anyway, this is punishment is really part of how we look at things.
Well, that's right.
Corporal, physical, we will do that sort of thing.
Sure.
So one can tell, one can see why,
Yeah.
what sort of reasoning, what ideas were behind the decision to bring him back.
Yeah.
And I think it's rather demotic, or he will get the job done, kind of.
It's strange what people will accept. You go take a country like America. If you said to somebody in America that we torture people to get confessions, they would be horrified. But America can do it in somewhere like Guantanamo. And Americans don't even blink. They don't, torture those bloody terrorists. They deserve it. But so it's kind of strange, isn't it? Which, of course, it's deliberately that they don't bring them onto American soil, because there could be consequences if they did that. But people seem to accept it in the same way that, as you say, we know, you and I colleagues in the office, some of them say exactly what you just said, that, yeah, you know, they need somebody like this, a strong man, strike fear into them, and, you know, it'll start going down. But, you know, you need to weigh up, you know, the two things. And is that really what we need?
Absolutely. But again, with the American, what America is doing, I'll try bring here a slight distinction, because with the people, they wouldn't accept it in America.
Yes,
See, this is different with us. We don't mind,
mind
a bit of it here and there, so that these criminals will stop what they're doing. So there's a law that they must respect. So what they will become hypocrites.
Yeah.
But what does it? Sometimes you do hear some people say that hypocrisy is the price that vice pays to virtue. that sort of thing.
Sure.
So yeah. So for us, it's the other way. For us, it's okay in that sense.
In our country.
So how do we work with that mindset? That's really what the problem is.
And how do we change it?
How do you change it?
Yeah.
So one would have thought that perhaps the state would have helped. But unfortunately, perhaps we have the sort of personnel or the sort of structures that do not sort of, what do they call it, clean the common spots, as it were, come with a proper strategy and enforce it and that sort of thing, train your people. That's really what the key is. Sure. So do you want the whole country to be full of Gorgon boobs?
This is it.
So this is the logic of it.
Sure.
If you're going to tell me that people like Gorgon Boop, we are the best to do this job, then go and recruit all of these Gorgon Boops and see where we are heading. You are not going to solve the problem. We all know that, because the problem is multi-dimensional.
Exactly.
You know, there are so many things with the problems. If you don't solve that, you're going to solve this. Sure. So all you're going to have is just abuse upon abuse upon abuse, but no positive outcomes really.
This is it. So yeah. And we will hold the chairman of the Human Rights Commission to his word that he was going to seek an answer from government as to why the reinstatement, and we will bring it to you when we get it. Thank you, Mr. Mburge, for that one. Now on to a completely different story, but one that is in line with some of the stories that we brought to you on QTV recently, to do with the state of our markets, the place where we buy food and clothing and other things. Many of us visit lots of these places. The next one you're going to see is about my local market. It's about a 3-minute walk from my door. Have a look.
Is it about people's attitude or poor behavior towards waste management? Or is it a lack of readily available policies or structures that result in such indiscriminate waste dumping? Visiting the Coastal Road Market, one is faced with an environment that is not easy on the eye. Litter, murky waters, the unbearable stench from disused freezers used to keep fish, and an unofficial area used for waste dumping can also be seen. Asatu Job, a market vendor, complained about the unhygienic market and blames both vendors for this indiscriminate waste dumping and the authorities for not providing ways for the easy, safe and clean disposal of waste from the market.
Another one where there's a blame game going on, Mr. Mburge. Started there not long into the clip. We've just seen there a shot of market vendors sitting on filthy water, selling their wares, some of it food. We showed that because we were horrified by it. But you heard there, they're saying, you know, it's the authorities. Don't the vendors have a role to play in this?
In some parts, as we all know, what we just saw there, it's a regular feature.
Yeah.
In some parts. People see that all the time. Yes, and actually one of the vendors said, I will blame people who indiscriminately
that's right.
are dumb all
yes,
over the place.
in the longer news piece, yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we'll also blame the government for not providing adequate facilities for people to dump their rubbish. But interestingly for me, apparently in the report, somewhere in the report, it says that the market originally was established illegally.
Yes, we've heard that, and we've actually spoken to Brikama Area Council about this. They said it was established illegally, but apparently, despite its illegality, apparently some of these people still pay rates to the council. So why are you taking rates from something that is illegal existence?
Absolutely.
And so that's been why they've kind of tried to justify some of the things they have not done, the things they ought to have done and have not done. They said, well, it's an illegal
and yet
market.
They're taking the rates.
Yes, and so you can see why the vendors might be a bit confused, saying you're taking our rates. Well, what are we getting for it? The toilets that they were meant to be building for them, the public toilets, one of them claimed they've been building it for the last 5 years and it's still not finished yet. I'm not sure what's slow drying cement or something. I'm not sure why that is. But really, if you are a council and a place like this exists, you should care enough to do something about it, surely.
Institutional disrepair.
Yeah.
They just confess to something there. No, I don't want to be harsh, but they've confessed something. They've confessed to something there that is really not nice. So yes, the taking rate, it shouldn't have been there. It's there. Fine. We'll move on. And interestingly, you said the toilets as well. There was one built 7 years ago.
That's right.
But it collapsed.
It collapsed.
So this is it. Institutionally, things are really in dire disrepair.
Yeah, sure.
It's not working. They seem not to know what to do. I think this is the deeper, as it were, legacy of that disarray that was left around, really. And then this government, relying on the same people, really cannot go beyond it itself.
Yeah.
There should be certain key strategic changes that we haven't seen so far. So we're seeing these two elements that have sort of pervaded all over the place. There's one, the sustainability. There was the toilet there 7 years ago built. When it collapsed, they couldn't bring it up. So the maintenance element is there. We don't do that at all. And that sort of thing. So yes, the government has a part to play, but again, people as well. This is where you have community initiatives. We are not very good at that. Americans are very good at that. They just have a community of people who would come and take care of at least a particular
because they
area.
said yes.
And then
they'll say this matters to us. This is where we sell. We sell food stuff. Look at the place, it's filthy, let's do something about it. And I bet you they'd do something.
It is extremely difficult, granted. I mean, if you earn very little, and maybe your club, the group, comes and asks you for, I don't know, maybe $10, $15, I don't know how much, it just depends.
Sure.
That will be extremely difficult. But it seems that at this point, civil society, us must start to take certain initiatives. You know what I mean? Perhaps one can help the government grow, because if you're going to wait for the government, it is not going to do it. The pressure will come. The pressure will definitely be there all the time. But there is this balance between us citizens, what we do, and what government does.
Indeed. Very, very valid point there, because some of the stuff we've shown on QTV has been instances where communities have taken the initiative and said, you know what, we're fed up waiting for government, we're going to do it ourselves. Not in something like this, but in certain fairly big initiatives, including streetlights, for example. So yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Ambrose. Now on to the next one, our fifth story, if you're keeping score. And this one I wanted to feature because, you know, since I've been here, I've gotten quite fed up with people making all sorts of promises. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and they're not keeping to these promises. Seems to be this might be another one of those cases where they've made grandiose claims about what it's about and who is out there to help, but the people it's meant to help don't seem to know of its existence. Have a look.
Access to finance remains a huge challenge for young people. A loan and a grant scheme directly from government to Gambian youth is a step in the right direction. However, the sustainability of such initiatives remains a challenge in the Gambia. For NEDI, if they are serious about helping young people, they need to step up their game. At the time of this broadcast, their website shown on their Facebook page was not working.
That non-working website, I think, sums it up perfectly, the kind of thing I'm talking about. Last year, His Excellency the President made a speech in which he called on young people. He said, have confidence in NEDI, the National Enterprise Development Initiative. If I was a young person listening to that, I'd say, wow, President is telling me to have confidence. We went out onto the streets as part of that report, and we asked the very people it's targeted at. And I can say, without being scientific, more than 70 or 80% have never even heard of the damn thing. So what are they doing, and who is it really for, and why do we keep coming up with these initiatives that just sound fancy on paper and just rubbish, really?
Absolutely, and really the secret is right there. The fact that not many people have heard of NEDI tells you that really they can't be doing much. Had they been achieving a lot, would have been featured, people would have known about them.
Yeah.
So there isn't much going on there. That much.
They've got a nice Facebook page, mind you.
Well, fine. and then we've also heard the head of communication saying that finance is a problem.
Yes.
So stuff like that. So this is it.
Although he was saying, he was also saying that finance is a problem for youths to get, for young people to get finance, and this is one of the things they've identified. Pardon me. Because head of communications, now you and I, don't want to get anybody into trouble, but if I'm head of communications of NEDI and we're aimed at the youths, I would take the message to schools. I will take it to colleges, institutions of learning where young people are there. Well, we went to those places and some of them had never heard of them. And so it does make you wonder how serious we are about this thing, or is this the kind of thing that politicians promise to young people in the hope that they'll say, yes, these people think about us and they care about us.
Yes, and you also see another disease, a sort of more all-pervasive disease, the sort of administration that is more process-based. Have you got the institution? Have you done your workshops? It's as if you're ticking boxes.
And they validate stuff.
They validate stuff. That is the sort of, it's not necessarily outcome-based kind of administration. We begin to see it. They just tick boxes. So this is the key. That is why you will have this name, National Enterprise Development Initiative.
Sounds grand.
It sounds great, so progressive, fantastic. But when you look at, the action on the ground, the achievements, the outcome, and that is really where we focus, where we concentrate on the outcomes. Not much.
Yeah. So. Not very encouraging. NEDI, really, as our colleague Jennifer Sonko said there, you need to step up your game. Thanks for that, Mr. Mboj. And now we'll go for a quick break. And when we come back, we'll have 5 more stories. So don't go away.
The best product in town is back. QCell's MiFi router. Get the best MiFi in the country for just $2,800 and connect up to 15 users with 4G internet speeds and a long-lasting battery life. So rush now to any of our customer care locations and get the best for less while stocks last. For more info, call our customer care on 111. QCell, Senior Boss, the Gambia's quality network. We innovate, others follow.
Welcome back. After that break, you're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review with myself, Ade Darami, and my colleague, Mahmoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interjections and interventions so far. Thank you. And if you are just joining us, we look at 10 stories from the week and we go into some detail and try and analyze them. We've had 5 so far, but 5 very good ones still to come. Let's get going. First one, monitoring. Now we have the Atlantic Ocean right there in front of us, and we need to be wary of our marine resources and monitor what's happening. Are we doing so? Judge for yourself.
Unregulated and unreported fishing is a global concern which needs concerted efforts to minimize. In October 2018, the Gambia and the European Union signed a 6-year Sustainable Fisheries Partnership Agreement. The objective of the fisheries sectoral support element of the agreement is to strengthen the sustainable management of our fisheries resources and the development of the sector, particularly fisheries monitoring, control and surveillance of our water.
Now, Mr. Mboj, I'm sure when you heard that we've signed a 6-year agreement and we're going to have surveillance and monitoring, I'm sure you're absolutely thrilled and convinced that this is happening. Tell me that is the case, surely.
Oh, God. Your irony. Yes, it's the same old story here.
What we've been talking about.
Isn't it? We've been talking about this. So we've got our observers It was interesting that I watched something similar program in Sierra Leone.
Right. Yes.
The Observers.
Yes.
Somebody.
That's right. Yes. I
when with the Observers, and one could see right there the shortcomings. They seem so powerless with whatever is going on.
Indeed.
In their case, no powers of arrest and that sort of
That's
thing.
right.
That's one.
Yes.
And then even in the clip that I saw with that report, they had the minister actually called one of the observers.
I saw her call the person.
That's it, because
yes.
She said she wasn't informed of anything.
Correct.
So one can see the potential issues there will be equally applicable in this country as well.
Yeah.
I mean, in a society really where we have to say it out, we are quite venal. You can see anything and you'll be bribed. We do not have really the structure in place to monitor.
And I'm glad you mentioned the Sierra Leone example, because yes, it's not about Gambia, but one can very well see that sort of thing happening here, because they had somebody who's been monitoring these activities of Sierra Leone for the last 40 years, and they showed him a clip, and he said, they said, yes, we tested this vessel. I won't tell you what country the vessel is from. Use your wild imagination. And he said they were meant to test whether the nets were illegal. He said, well, if they wanted to test whether they should have opened the nets and you would have seen them trawl along. He said they didn't even open the net. And yet they passed it and said, oh, yes, they're not contravening any laws or any sort of international maritime or local laws. And yes, we didn't see anybody getting bribed, but the suspicion, the whiff, the smell of that hung rather acridly in the air, that they could... We talk about tick box. They could pass something like that. As he said, it was patently a nonsensical examination that was done of this trawler as to see whether it was breaching the rules or not, and they gave it a pass mark.
Yes, that's absolutely it. So the ineffective...
And that could happen here, surely.
That can easily happen here.
Sure.
Here we know that really the heart of the matter is that we do not have the vessel, the patrol vessel, to really patrol our waters.
That's right.
So we rely on things like Sea Shepherd.
Yes, indeed.
We had something like that helping us.
Yeah.
So that's not sustainable. We all know that. So that is the fundamental problem that we face. So yes, you can train all of these observers, but structurally, if you do not have really the facilities to effectively monitor your waters, I'm not sure how much of a contribution that these observers can make.
Yeah, and I think you and I probably on the same day watched the Sierra Leone piece, and as I said, it's not Sierra Leone, it's Gambia we're talking about here, but one can very well see I was going to say, one can see the analogy can be extended here, because lack of resources, lack of capacity to actually hunt down, lack of powers of arrest. You can observe, but you observe and then what?
And the other bit, we have to say it, our susceptibility to taking bribes.
Yes.
So much goes on, much, these foreigners, they get away with so much because of these things.
They know we are bribable.
Bribable, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, not long ago in the Fisheries Department, remember what happened with that audio, and there was an investigation going on.
Quite.
So we know what sort of thing is going on.
Sure.
So put the institutional, the infrastructural deficiencies of our system. The most important bit, in many ways, the human being, the human factor, because with that, even if you had the systems in place, they would perhaps pervert it. We are the ones who put these things in place. So we are the biggest problem. I mean, we have to say it.
We are the biggest problem, and as you said, all these people have been trained. When they start delivering results, then we'll give them the pat on the back. But for now, we'll hold our horses. But thank you for that, and sorry for mixing my metaphors there. Now, on to something else, which we've said time and time again. It's good and it's worthy and it's laudable that we should have, and that's to focus on technology. TVET. Have a look, and when we come back, we'll discuss it.
With the global population expected to increase to 8 billion by 2030, skills acquisition is one way to prevent the menace of unemployment. The Vice President, Dr. Aissatou Touré, highlighted the importance of TVET, saying it is part of the National Development Plan 2018 to 2021.
The United Nations Declaration on Education for Sustainable Development has recommended that all countries take proactive steps in integrating sustainable development into their educational policies and programs at all levels and in all sectors of the economy. This concept touches on key issues such as poverty reduction, sustainable livelihoods, climate change, human rights issues, and gender equality, among others.
We heard the Vice President there talking. We're talking about technical and vocational education and training. It's one of these things, Mr. Mboj, which always seems rather obvious until you go around and you find out it's just not there. Teaching people technical and vocational skills that actually some of them could become entrepreneurs, start their own businesses and earn money. And we keep saying dissuade people from using this kind of back way, because if you start a business and it's successful, you might think, you know, I don't need to do that. I can make it here, this whole techie fee, make it in the Gambia. But it's one of the things that always I'm perplexed as to why it's not embedded in the curriculum at you know, quite an early stage, because not everybody's going to be a lawyer, doctor, accountant, whatever. Some people have different skills, but we don't actually support them until, you know, you see one initiative here or there. Why not?
Well, in the past, I have to say we had this sort of British bias, as it were,
yes,
against sort of these.
Yes, you get respect if you get certain type of profession.
So you get respect with the more academic
yes,
stuff,
yes,
not the technical stuff. In the Gambia before you had the high schools, but you had the secondary technical schools as well, but it didn't have much respect.
Yes.
So it had a sort of stigma attached to it, so a lot of people were reluctant to take it. I think that culture is still lingering, though I think that it is also changing a bit, because I spent like 8 years in a Tibet institute, really Quantum Net Institute of Technology, and throughout my dealings with the national authority, they have this National Accreditation and Quality Assurance Authority, they're really trying to improve things and the like. But you see, structurally the issue is trainers.
Yeah, quite. Yes.
There's a problem with that.
Yes.
What you have is that somebody who masters his subject, granted, but do I know how to teach?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Do I know how to teach?
And it's a valid point. I mean, you know, some of the worst teachers I had or lecturers I had were people who had PhDs, but they weren't good lecturers. And so just because people have a particular skill set in terms of a degree or so does not mean that they're good at imparting that knowledge. Not everybody is. And glad you mentioned the thing about, you know, people look at certain professions and so on. When I was growing up in Sierra Leone, and they opened something called the Technical Institute. People who went to the schools where they learnt Greek and Latin actually looked down on people who went to the Technical Institute, in spite of the fact that in later years some of these people now own thriving businesses based on that, what they learned at those technical skills. And these guys are still can speak ancient Greek and ancient Latin, but you've got no skills.
Absolutely. I mean, here as well, we had our GTTI, the Technical Training Institute, established way back during the First Republic, and then afterwards MBI came along. But even in the private sector afterwards, you had this proliferation of all sorts of institutes. But again, there's been also population increase. We've had a lot more kids and the like. But this is it. Because we went through also a period of massive brain drain. Things are connected. Little wonder that when you go to our schools, have all these buildings, have everything that you like. But a lot of people were running away from it. You see, there was a time when the best in the class used to become teachers, but then afterwards the best in the class became lawyers, doctors and all of that. So teaching is been going to the bottom all the time. And then afterwards now, some people say that you do have the mercenary teachers in certain levels from Sierra Leone.
I met some of them.
Ghana, from Nigeria. These are the teachers now, particularly in certain sectors, in certain areas.
And I have to say, being involved in an education conference in 2018, I'm going to get into trouble for this, but some of the teachers I interviewed, honestly, I would have wanted to inspect their qualifications a bit more thoroughly. I was not impressed. And I despaired as a parent. I thought, I'm glad my child is not attending school here or attending this specific school, because some of them, I would not let them teach my child. I didn't think they were fit And these are people I interviewed.
Absolutely, yes. And we've also come across that sort of thing, you know, throughout our period in that sector. You see that. So you begin to see that our problem is really the human element. Without that personnel, that capacity in terms of personnel, really, structures will mean nothing. We are the structures, if you know what I mean. So this is it. Our basic difficulty is that human element, I feel. So that is why we're having problems with coming up with structures, doing things the right way. You know, it's really very difficult if you do not have the right people in place. Structures will mean for nothing. Rules, regulations, whatever will mean nothing really. These things are as good as the people.
I said people matter. Absolutely right, Mr. Mboj. Thank you for that. Now, another matter, ECOWAS, Parliament, Economic Community of West African States. There is a parliament and there's also a court. Did you know that? Sure you did. Anyway, have a look at this clip.
On a different issue for the community parliament, Speaker Tunis called on attorney generals in member states to organize an urgent meeting to put an end to what he described as an ugly trend for member states to be disrespecting the judgments of the ECOWAS Court of Justice with impunity. The latest such incident being the judgment that Cape Verde should release Alex Saab, a Colombian businessman with close ties to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, who has been held in Cape Verde since June 2020 at the request of the USA.
Here, I wish to refer to the continuous non-compliance of the rulings of the Community Court of Justice by member states and other major actors within the region. Respect for the rule of law, of which total compliance with court judgments is an integral part, is a major symbol of democracy. It's a major pillar of measuring how mature a community's democracy is.
CDI Tunis there. Before I come on to that country, which I'm sometimes accused of being an ambassador of Cape Verde, he mentions there, and also our colleague mentioned in the report, the court, the ECOWAS court, and how the rules and the judgments of the court are being disrespected. If we go back to Sierra Leone, when President Koroma kicked out his vice president, Alhaji Sam Sumana, he took the case to the ECOWAS court and he won the case, and they even awarded him, I think, 2.5 million. Mr. Mboj, I can tell you, for all it mattered, they might as well have awarded him 25 bututs. Ernest Koroma completely ignored the judgment. And then it was revealed that although Sierra Leone and other West African countries had signed a protocol respecting and recognizing the court, there was an additional protocol that said we will be bound by any judgments of this court. And you know what? Almost no country in ECOWAS has signed that very important protocol. Is this not typical of us?
Is it typical of us? I think that there's a tension. There must be, because we see it in the EU. I remember Britain and the EU, the tensions they used to have. There will always be a tension in this sort of multinational organizations between the national sovereign, the national interest, and the regional or the bloc interest. This is bound to be. So, and maybe some decisions are easier to implement than others. For instance, with the Gambia, with the journalists, remember, who were awarded, I went to the, we honored it, I think, from the papers, we honored it, so we paid up. So let's be realistic here. Some judgments are easier to implement than others, and that will go on. This tension will always be there. I am one of those, maybe I'm a nationalist, I do not know what to call it, but I think that we should be very, very watchful of these blocks.
Giving away the sovereignty to them.
Yes, giving away sovereignty. And you know that you have to scrutinize these protocols, what they believe, because they may favor some countries better than others. Because I remember when Margaret Thatcher in the EU fighting for British interests.
That's right.
Sometimes I wonder, who is going to fight for Gambia's interests within these bodies? We are so small. What advantages do we have that we can leverage, you know, to really fight for our interests? So I'm very scared. I wished I could really inspect these instruments that we are signing. We hope that we are not falling on the loser's side, because with these things, all cannot benefit equally. It doesn't exist. It has never existed. That win-win situation is not true.
Sure.
We've seen it elsewhere.
That's right. And as I said at the top of the hour, some stories demand more time than others. And you know, the ECOWAS Parliament, I think, is one of those where it will run and run. But just to pick up on the point you mentioned there, you suspect that certain judgments, if they were made against Nigeria and they decided they weren't going to do it, and another judgment was made against Gambia, you think if Nigeria kind of put down their feet, nobody's going to do anything to them, are they?
That is precisely my fear.
Yeah.
At this point, we should have had sort of most skillful, most experienced people in positions. You know what I mean? Going to these meetings and you know, where they draft these protocols, laws, regulations, whatever, negotiating on our behalf so that they can get the best. Given the situation, they can get the best out of it. But I am not sure whether I have confidence in the people doing it right now.
I think many people share those sentiments, Mr. Mboch. Thank you for that. Now, 2 more stories to go, and the penultimate story, UTG Research Directorate. I won't go into much detail because my colleague tells us everything we need to know. Have a look.
Today, my message to the government is to invest, promote and support university research at all levels, because that will contribute to national development. Supporting research, it will help in shaping evidence-based policies. Why do we create policies? It's to effect change. But if these policies are not informed through research, only based on assumptions, we won't realize the change they were intended for.
As my reporter colleagues like to say, a laudable thing, the inauguration of a research and consultancy center. This, in Western countries, these ten a penny and take them for granted, and sometimes they can have quite a lot of clout and influence on government and national policy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the left, they've got their researchers. The right, they've got their researchers. But that kind of thinking is integrated into governance, how you govern in the modern way, that scientific kind of thing. Obviously, that's the only way, really, because by research you get the facts, what the facts are. Otherwise, it's just things that impression. I've got an impression.
I got a feeling about this. I got a
gut
feeling.
That, you know, the opinions, the conjecture, the hypotheses, and all of these things. We need the facts exactly to have informed policy, as he says there. But again, we know that is part of the problem. But the other huge chunk is implementation of it. That is what our problem is.
That's the big problem.
So here with the university, then, yes, fantastic, laudable. Let me continue with that cliche.
Absolutely. We welcome it, but I think we will see the evidence. As they said, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. When we've eaten some of their policy and research and consultancy work, we'll then know whether they're doing the work that they should be doing. So thank you for that. And that takes us on to our final story, and quite a somber one. Both here in the Gambia and Senegal, there have been a series of drownings at our beaches, of which there are many. Have a look.
What I think is that every beachside restaurant should at least employ 1 or 2 lifeguards. Most lifeguards usually stay here and use our facilities. If every restaurant employs a lifeguard, that will help them to earn a living. It will encourage them to be around and save people from drowning.
Matthew Demba, a youth who came to enjoy the cold breeze at Palmarima, gave some advice to his fellow beach users.
My advice to
my fellow youth is that if you know that you can't swim, just enjoy the cool breeze and the beautiful nature gift from God.
Mr. Mboch, we've got about a minute and a half, so not much time on this particular story, but the young man there talks about if you know you can't swim, just enjoy. But sometimes, you and I know, it's quite, you get, no pun intended, swept up in the moment of going to the beach and you know, you see people frolicking, you think, oh, I'll frolic as well. How do we get people to resist that urge, that temptation?
Oh, I don't think we can. especially on a Sunday, during the summer break, especially right now on Sundays, you find kids all over the place. We must come with a strategy, with a way of having lifeguards on that. Perhaps can we do it through local authorities? How can they coordinate these things? But to expect maybe these beach bars, restaurants, as the person was suggesting there, everyone to provide a lifeguard, I'm not so sure, especially right now, they're all struggling. The tourism industry is not working. So let's take the reality as it is, then we try to come with the structure of how these things work in many ways.
It's a difficult one because, as you rightly say, we can't really rely on things, but we need a national strategy, not a kind of piecemeal one, say, oh, this beach has a particular strategy, and because what we've heard is that some beaches is quite well organized and in others it's not, and there needs to be a national strategy that is rolled out. And so you expect the same service, as it were, whichever beach you go to.
Absolutely. I mean, let's put it this way. Now things have changed a bit, obviously. But with us as well, when we were kids in Banjul, we used to go and swim. That was part of our lives. I mean, the beach is right there. But again, there was an informal structure there, as it were, because every grown-up, every adult was some sort of policing, was kind of like a parent to you. So when we went to the beach, you had the grown-ups, the bigger boys, who would be guiding you. They were like your guide, teaching you and taking care of you. Of course, that structure has broken down to some extent, I suspect, but there's nothing in its place, and now we have a lot more kids, the population, so there's a new challenge now. We need to deal with it.
Thank you. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of the program. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj, and thank you for all your interjections on all the stories. And to the listeners and viewers, I always say this, thank you for watching, and until the next time, goodbye.